I met Emily 9 years ago at a wedding neither of us wanted to be at. It was one of those huge, formal events for a couple we barely knew. She was there as a plus one to a college friend, and I was invited because the groom used to be my roommate. We ended up seated at the same table during the reception, and she made a comment about how the steak was the driest she'd ever had. I laughed, partly because she was right, partly because she said it loud enough that people actually turned around. She had this energy that kind of drew you in without trying. Confident, but not in an arrogant way. She made people feel like they were in on something with her. I remember thinking she was the most alive person I'd ever met. We started talking that night, and didn't really stop. We exchanged numbers before the night ended, and by the end of that week, we'd already gone out twice. What I liked most was how open she was. No games, no guessing. If she liked something, she said so. If she didn't, she said that too. It was refreshing. Emily worked in marketing, fast-paced, full of late hours and creative chaos. I was more of a structure and spreadsheets kind of guy. I run a small IT services firm. We were different in a lot of ways, but it worked. I grounded her. She pushed me out of my comfort zone. There was balance there. After 2 years of dating, we moved in together. Bought a townhouse just outside the city. Nothing huge, but it had a little patio and a bright kitchen that she instantly claimed as her zone. She loved cooking when she had time, blasting music and dancing barefoot while I hovered uselessly behind her pretending to help. Our Sunday brunches turned into a tradition. She made the food, I made the coffee. We'd sit in our pajamas until noon just talking, laughing, or watching the dog chase birds through the yard. We got married the following spring, under a big oak tree in a park not far from where we had our first date. It was one of those days where the weather behaves like it knows it's important. Sunlight in all the right places, a cool breeze, and just enough emotion to make your throat catch without crying all the way through your vows. Life settled into something comfortable, predictable in a good way. We hosted dinners, traveled when we could, spent our evenings wrapped up in each other and whatever show we were binging. We both worked hard, but always made time for each other. That part was important to us. Looking back now, I still think of those early years as some of the happiest in my life. We weren't perfect, but we were good together. Solid. After the wedding, everything moved naturally, almost effortlessly. We didn't have that post-honeymoon adjustment some couples talk about. Our rhythm was already set, just deeper now. We got back from our short trip to the coast, opened the front door to our little townhouse, and it felt like stepping into the next chapter of something we already knew by heart. Our lives fit together in a way that just worked. Emily had this big energy, especially when she came home from work. Bags hitting the floor, heels kicked off, ideas pouring out of her like she'd been holding them in all day. I'd usually be at the kitchen table or on the couch with my laptop, and the second she walked in, everything shifted. She'd talk, I'd listen, and sometimes we'd just sit together afterward, decompressing in the same space. No need to fill the silence. Weekdays were busy, but structured. We'd eat dinner around 7, sometimes takeout, sometimes something she'd cook while I stood around pretending to be helpful. I handled the cleanup, she handled the playlists. Most nights ended with us watching a show curled up under the same old blanket we'd had since college. She insisted it was hideous, but she loved it more than I did. Our weekends had a different rhythm. Saturdays were for errands, walks with the dog, and catching up on whatever we'd neglected during the week. Emily loved visiting farmers markets, even if we didn't need anything. She'd find some overpriced loaf of bread or weird handmade jam, and somehow it became the highlight of breakfast the next day. Sundays were quieter, late starts, long coffee, and our little tradition of making brunch together. I'd always wake up first, and by the time she wandered into the kitchen, I'd have music playing and the coffee brewing. It became our thing. We also traveled when we could, not constantly, but enough to say we'd seen places. A long weekend in Chicago, a spontaneous trip to Montreal. One year, we drove through New England in the fall just to chase the leaves. Emily always packed too much, and I always forgot something important, but we laughed through it all. Those trips felt like little time capsules, snapshots of us away from the noise, just being ourselves. She loved taking photos, even of the mundane. Her morning latte, our dog staring at squirrels, me half asleep with a book in my lap. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now I realize she was documenting everything, building some kind of emotional scrapbook without ever saying it out loud. We had our friends, our favorite restaurants, our inside jokes. We argued sometimes, but nothing serious. Just small flare-ups. What show to watch, whether we should go out or stay in, how much to spend on throw pillows. I'd call her dramatic, she'd call me boring, and by the next morning, it was forgotten. Our life was stable. Not boring, not explosive, just solid. Safe. Familiar in the way a favorite sweatshirt is. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. We had love. We had routine. We had each other. And at the time, I thought that was enough. If there was one thing I appreciated most about life with Emily, it was the feeling that no matter how unpredictable the world got, coming home meant walking into something familiar. I didn't grow up with that kind of stability. My parents divorced early, and home always felt temporary, like a rental you didn't fully unpack in. But with her, things felt settled. Like I could finally exhale. We weren't flashy. We didn't throw dinner parties every weekend or jet off to tropical destinations. Our life was a little more ordinary than that, but in the best way. We had our rituals. She liked burning candles in the evening, those expensive soy ones that claimed to smell like forest rain or vintage linen. I used to tease her about it, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't grow to like the way the house smelled because of her. Our dog, Max, was basically our child. A goofy retriever mix who shed like it was his job and somehow always found a way to end up in the middle of the bed at night. Emily treated him like royalty. Homemade treats, doggy jackets in the winter, and more photos of him on her phone than of me, probably. He became part of our rhythm too. Morning walks, evening cuddles, trips to the dog park where she'd laugh at how social he was while I stood around making awkward small talk with other dog owners. She'd always been close to her family, Sunday calls with her mom, occasional trips to visit her sister across the state. I liked how important that was to her. Family meant something. She pulled me into that world slowly, and before long, her people became my people. Holidays with them were chaotic, but warm. There were too many opinions in one room, too many overlapping conversations, but it felt alive, loud and loving, like something worth belonging to. We worked hard during the week, but we always came back to each other. Sometimes I'd hear her on the phone late at night, still talking work stuff with her team. She was always good at what she did, persuasive, sharp, quick on her feet. I admired that about her. I handled the quieter parts of life, budgets, errands, fixing the drawer that kept sticking. She joked that I was the calm in her storm. I liked being that. We weren't the kind of couple that posted every milestone online. Most of our good moments weren't broadcast. They were tucked into everyday things. Drinking wine in our sweatpants on a Wednesday. Laughing at some terrible reality show. Holding hands in the car without saying a word. I think a lot of people look for grand romantic gestures, but I never needed that from her. I just needed what we had. The normal, dependable, quietly happy life we built together. At least, that's what I thought we had. It didn't happen all at once. That's what I keep circling back to. How the shift came slowly. Like a door that doesn't slam shut, but clicks softly behind you, and you don't even realize you're locked out until it's too late. The first thing I noticed was the phone. Emily was never super secretive with it before. Sure, she had a password, but I knew it, and it wasn't a big deal. We used to share playlists, laugh at each other's search histories, send memes back and forth across the room. Lately, though, she'd started turning the screen face down every time she set it on the table. I'd walk into the room, and she'd quickly hit the lock button. Not every time, just enough that I noticed. I didn't say anything at first. I told myself not to be paranoid. People get more private sometimes. It doesn't mean anything. But it wasn't just the phone. She started going out more. Not with me, with friends I hadn't heard of before. When I'd ask who she was meeting, she'd offer names I didn't recognize, or just say, just some people from work. Sometimes she'd be vague, almost annoyed, like I was prying. It's not a big deal, babe, she'd say, brushing past the question before I could even respond. And then there was how she looked. She'd always taken care of herself. Nothing extreme, just casual style, low-effort makeup. But lately, there was a different energy. More time in front of the mirror. New clothes I hadn't seen before. Perfume at night. Even when she said she was just grabbing drinks with Julia. One night she came home late, later than usual. I was half asleep on the couch, waiting for her, and she walked in smelling like wine and something I couldn't quite place. Not another person. Just something unfamiliar. She seemed startled to see me awake. Gave me a quick kiss on the forehead and said, "You should have gone to bed, babe." And maybe that was nothing. Maybe I was just tired. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't entirely in the picture anymore. Like I was standing just outside the frame of something important. There were other things, too. The way she smiled less around me. The way conversations felt shorter. Like she was half present, her mind always somewhere else. Sometimes I'd tell her a story from work, something small that I thought was funny, and she'd blink and ask me to repeat it. Not because she didn't hear me, but because she wasn't really listening. I started paying attention. Not obsessively, just watching. Noticing. Putting pins in little changes I didn't have an explanation for. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. But something was different. And once that thought took root, it didn't leave. I didn't know what I was looking for yet. I just knew that I'd lost the ease I used to feel when I looked at her. And once you lose that feeling, it's hard to pretend you don't notice. I used to think you could pinpoint the exact moment when something changed in a relationship. Like a before and after photo, one clear, the other just slightly out of focus. But what's harder is when the change doesn't come in a moment. It comes in 100 little ones, too small to notice on their own. And by the time you do notice, it already feels like it's been happening forever. Emily started going out more often. Not wildly more, just consistently. Once or twice a week became 3 or 4. Always something last minute, a friend from work, an old college friend passing through town, a quick drink after a late meeting. She'd tell me not to wait up, and I usually didn't. But I started waking up around 1 or 2 a.m., checking the clock, listening for the sound of her key in the lock. Some nights she'd come in quiet, slipping off her heels and brushing her teeth with the door closed. Other nights she'd slide into bed like nothing was unusual, whisper, "Hey babe," and fall asleep instantly. I'd lie there watching the shadows from the streetlights play across the ceiling, wondering when our nights had stopped including each other. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who questions everything, overanalyzes every smile, every text tone, every change in routine. But things kept catching me off guard. She started getting texts late at night, and her phone never left her hand. One afternoon, I saw her smile down at it, the kind of smile that's soft and private. I asked what was funny. She said, "Oh, just Julia being dramatic again," but her tone was tight, like she was defending something that hadn't even been questioned. Then there were the absences. I'd come home from work, and she wouldn't be there. No note, no message. Once, I texted her around 6:30 to ask if she'd eaten, and she didn't reply until after 9. "Sorry, phone died," she said. But I'd seen her carry a charger everywhere for years. It didn't add up. Our routines frayed in quiet ways. We used to make grocery lists together. Now I'd find random items in the fridge I didn't recognize. She bought oat milk, even though she never drank it. A new brand of coffee showed up in the pantry. A sweatshirt I didn't recognize appeared on the chair in our bedroom one day. When I asked, she said it was from her old college days. "It's been in the back of the closet forever," she added with a smile that didn't quite land. We weren't fighting. We weren't even talking less, technically. But our conversation started feeling like something we had to get through. She was distracted. I felt like background noise. Sometimes I'd say something just to see if she'd register it. A joke, a memory, a plan for the weekend, and she'd smile and nod like she was checking a box. I don't know what changed, not exactly. I just know that we used to feel like two people moving through life together. Now it felt like we were just living in the same house at the same time, on separate timelines that didn't always overlap. And I couldn't help wondering what she wasn't telling me. It's strange how the familiar can begin to feel unfamiliar without anything visibly changing. Our house looked the same. Our routines hadn't been torn apart. But it was like living in a version of our life that had been copied and pasted slightly out of alignment. The furniture was all in the same place. The dog still greeted me at the door, and Emily still said, "Love you," before heading out, but none of it felt rooted anymore. It felt like I was walking through a set we'd built together, one she'd quietly stopped believing in. I started to notice the way she looked past me, even when we were talking. It wasn't dramatic, just enough to feel it. Her eyes would drift off when I told her about my day, like her body was still with me, but her mind was already somewhere else. She'd nod, smile at the right moments, but there was no spark behind it. I'd ask her questions just to see if she was really listening, and half the time, she'd give me an answer that didn't quite fit the question. I didn't call her out on it. I just logged it, quietly, in the growing list of things I wasn't sure how to explain. It wasn't that she was distant all the time. Some mornings, she'd still laugh at my terrible coffee-making skills. Some nights, she'd still curl up beside me while we watched TV. But it felt mechanical, like a routine she was going through rather than something she wanted to be part of. There was no warmth to it anymore. No unspoken intimacy. Just movement. Presence without connection. One evening, I noticed she had started wearing makeup on days she used to stay home in sweatpants. Nothing flashy, just enough to look different. Sharper. Brighter. When I mentioned it casually, she brushed it off with a quick, "I just felt like it," and changed the subject. I let it go, but the unease sat with me for hours. It wasn't about the makeup. It was the way she said it, like she was used to explaining herself without really explaining anything. Then there were the phone calls she took in the other room. Emily had always been pretty open with her phone. She wasn't the type to hide texts or take calls in secret. But lately, if her phone rang and I was nearby, she'd step out, into the hallway, into the kitchen, even into the backyard. And when she came back, she'd act like nothing had happened. No mention of who it was, no lingering emotion. Just a hard reset. Like she was switching roles between conversations. One night, after she said she was going out with some people from the office, I saw her spend nearly 20 minutes getting ready. She changed outfits twice, curled her hair, and sprayed on a perfume I hadn't smelled in over a year, the same one she used to wear when we were still dating. I watched her from the doorway, and something about it hit me in the chest. Not because she looked good, she always looked good, but because there was a focus to her preparation. A kind of excitement I hadn't seen directed at me in months. When she noticed me standing there, she smiled and said, "You're staring like we're 20 again." I forced a laugh and said, "Just wondering who gets the honor of that perfume tonight." She rolled her eyes. "Relax, it's just some coworkers. Don't be weird." Then she kissed me on the cheek and left. That kiss stayed with me longer than it should have. Not because of how it felt, but because of how it didn't. By this point, I'd stopped trusting the quiet moments. They used to bring me peace, those gentle pauses in the day when we'd sit side by side without needing to talk. I used to love those silences with Emily. They felt earned, like the kind of comfort you build with someone over years of being in sync. But lately, our silences felt different. Heavy. Not peaceful, but paused. Like we were waiting for something neither of us wanted to say out loud. I started to dread evenings. It wasn't because we were fighting on the surface. Everything still looked fine. But there was a hollowness to the way we existed beside each other. I'd make dinner. She'd compliment it. We'd watch a show. She'd laugh at the funny parts. But there was no spark underneath. Just repetition. I felt like we were actors performing a marriage that had slowly started losing its meaning. One Thursday, she told me she was going to a friend's birthday party. Someone from college, she said. She was already dressed when I got home. Hair curled, makeup perfect, wearing a dress I hadn't seen in over a year. It was a little more than casual, a little less than formal, just enough to make me feel like I didn't belong in the same frame. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't wait up." I asked where the party was. She hesitated for a second. "Just long enough." "Midtown," she said. "At that rooftop place, the one with the weird art on the walls." Then she was gone. Later that night, I looked up that rooftop bar. It had closed 6 months ago. I didn't confront her about it. I told myself there could be 100 explanations. Maybe she meant a different place. Maybe it had reopened. Maybe she got the name wrong. But the truth is, I didn't want an explanation. Not really. I just wanted to stop feeling like my gut was whispering things I wasn't ready to hear. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed. Not intentionally at first, it just happened. I'd wake up and realize I'd curled away from her, like my body was bracing for distance even in sleep. She didn't mention it. She didn't pull me closer, or ask what was wrong, or even shift toward me. She just slept. Peacefully. Or at least, that's how it looked. The next weekend, I found a receipt in the pocket of the coat she'd left draped over the chair. A bar tab, 2 drinks, 1 appetizer. That wasn't unusual. But it was the date that caught me off guard. It was from the night she told me she had a late meeting at the office. I held onto it for a few minutes, just staring at the print. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. Tired of these moments that made me feel like I was being kept outside of something I was supposed to be part of. I didn't say anything about the receipt. Just like I hadn't said anything about the bar, or the new clothes, or the late-night messages. I started to realize that what was bothering me most wasn't what Emily was doing. It was how little she seemed to care whether I noticed. That was the part one couldn't shake. It was a Sunday afternoon when it happened. One of those gray, forgettable days where everything feels still. Emily was out, said she was running errands, might stop by her sister's to help her with something. I didn't ask questions. By then, I'd stopped asking too many of them. The answers didn't match up anyway. I was sitting on the couch with Max at my feet, half watching a movie I'd seen before, when my phone buzzed. Just once. No caller ID. A message from a number not saved in my contacts. You don't know me, but I think you need to see this. I'm sorry. Underneath it, a video file. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered above the screen, and I felt that awful buzz in my chest, the one where your body already knows what your mind hasn't caught up to yet. I told myself it could be a prank. Spam. Someone who sent it to the wrong number. But I opened it. I should have stopped it after the first few seconds. I should have closed my eyes or thrown the phone across the room or pretended I never saw it. But I didn't. I watched the entire thing. It was filmed on a phone, shaky at first, but clear enough. I could hear music in the background. A laugh. Then Emily, her face unmistakable, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. She was sitting at a bar table, leaning across it towards someone. And that someone was Chris, her ex. He looked the same as I remembered from years ago, sharper jawline, louder presence, the kind of guy who always knew the camera was on him even when it wasn't. He reached across the table, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She laughed and leaned in. Their lips met, slow and familiar. And then the camera panned slightly. Whoever was filming must have been behind a pillar or a booth and kept recording. It wasn't explicit, nothing graphic, but it was intimate. Too intimate to be explained away. At the end of the video, there was one more message. She's been seeing him for a while. I thought you deserved to know. I just sat there, frozen. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the TV, some old sitcom still playing like nothing had changed. But everything had. Chris. Of all people. I remembered the way Emily used to talk about him in the early days of our relationship, how things were messy, how they just weren't meant to be, how she was over that chapter. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? That was ancient history. We were married. We were supposed to be beyond all that. But there she was, pressed up against the one man she'd promised was part of her past. I didn't know who sent the video. I still don't. Maybe one of her friends who finally grew a conscience. Maybe someone who just got tired of watching a lie play out in real time. Whoever it was, they shattered whatever hope I had left in less than 60 seconds. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, watching the same clip over and over again, until my phone went dark in my hands and the light outside started to fade. After I watched the video, I sat in the same spot for hours. Not out of shock, but out of stillness. It felt like a switch had been flipped inside me, not the kind of rage that explodes, but the kind that calcifies. Cold, quiet, measured. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even message her. I just accepted it. All the missed signals, all the lies she'd fed me like they were harmless. It all added up now. The night's out. The phone turned away. The new perfume. The secrecy. The emotional distance I had been trying so hard to explain away wasn't confusion or burnout. It was her slipping away into someone else's arms. Into his arms. What I did next wasn't planned. It just felt like instinct. I stood up, walked to her bedroom, opened the closet, and started packing my things. Not frantically, carefully. Everything that was mine went into a suitcase. My clothes, my gear, my watch she gave me for our anniversary 2 years ago. Then I moved onto the drawers, grabbing whatever else I'd left scattered through the house. As I packed, I made a list in my head of everything I had ever given her. Gifts, jewelry, a laptop, a necklace from Paris. I found them all and took them with me. Every trace of love I had offered her, I reclaimed. She didn't get to keep those parts of me. But there was one thing left to do. I called the only person who came to mind Tessa, her closest friend. The same Tessa who had once, half-drunk at a New Year's party, whispered to me that she'd always wondered what it would be like if we'd met first. I never acted on it, not even for a second. Until now. I invited her over that evening. She didn't ask why. She just came. Maybe she knew. Maybe she'd seen the shift happening too, and was just waiting for someone to say it out loud. When I opened the door and she looked at me, something passed between us. No words, just a silent understanding. We didn't talk much. She stepped inside, and for the first time in weeks, I felt seen. I kissed her. She didn't pull away. And that night, I made sure to record it. Just one video, short and deliberate. I didn't do it for revenge, not really. I did it for symmetry. For truth. For closure. I made sure the camera showed my face. I wanted Emily to look into the screen and know exactly what she'd lost. The next morning, while she was still gone, I printed a single piece of paper and scrawled 3 words on it in permanent marker. I know everything. I placed it on the kitchen table next to the USB drive. No note. No long goodbye. No emotional breakdown. Just those 3 words and the image of me moving on. Then I zipped up my last bag, whistled for Max, and walked out the front door for the last time. I left nothing behind but silence. No warning. No confrontation. I didn't block her. I didn't even text her. I just disappeared. By the time she came home, I was already gone. So were my clothes, my photos, and the life I had built with her. Everything we had was vacuumed out of that house with surgical precision. She would walk in expecting the same tired lies to keep working, only to find the truth staring her in the face, wrapped in the sharp sting of her own hypocrisy. She tried to call me that night, 8 times in a row. Then came the texts. What is this? Please answer me. Can we talk? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The message was already delivered. And this time, she didn't get to explain anything away. In the weeks after I left, I kept waiting for the moment it would all hit me. I braced myself for the flood, the collapse, the regret, the kind of heartbreak that knocks the wind out of you. But it never came. Not like that. What came instead was a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in months. Like I had finally stepped out of a storm I didn't even know I'd been living in. Emily kept trying to reach me for the first 2 weeks. She called from different numbers, sent long emails, voice notes, even a handwritten letter she left at my office building. I didn't read any of them. I didn't listen. I didn't care what she had to say. It wasn't bitterness. I just didn't need answers anymore. The truth had already spoken for itself. I moved into a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy. Just quiet. Clean. Mine. I bought a new set of dishes, new sheets, a cheap second-hand couch that creaked when I sat down. It felt good to start from scratch. No memories baked into the furniture. No scent lingering in the walls. Just space. Breathable, uncluttered space. I started going to the gym again, not because I was trying to prove something, but because I needed to feel grounded. I picked up an old hobby, photography, something I hadn't touched in years. I walked around the city on weekends, snapping pictures of things I used to ignore. Brick walls, strangers laughing, trees leaning into the wind. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I noticed the world outside of her. About a month after I moved out, I ran into someone at a bookstore. Her name was Lena. She was looking for the same novel I was, some lesser-known travel memoir about grief and growth. We joked about fighting for the last copy, and she offered to let me have it if I promised to tell her whether it was worth reading. We got coffee that same afternoon. There was something simple about her. Not plain, just grounded. Her questions didn't feel like small talk. She asked about my photos, about my dog, about the kind of silence I liked best, early morning or late at night. She didn't know my story. Not yet. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to carry it into every room I entered. We started seeing each other slowly. No pressure. No expectations. Just small moments that didn't demand anything more than honesty. One night, we walked along the waterfront, and she stopped mid-sentence, looked at me, and said, "You feel like someone who survived something." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. There's a part of me that still feels bruised, still remembers the feeling of waiting for someone who was already with someone else. But I don't live in that place anymore. I've moved on, not because I found someone new, but because I found myself again. The man I used to be, the one who believed in loyalty, in quiet love, in being there even when it wasn't easy, that man is still here. And he's not bitter. He's not broken. He just knows better now. Emily made her choices. I made mine. And for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I used to think closure came from conversations, that if I could just get all the answers, if she admitted everything, if I could see inside her mind, I'd feel better, that I'd be able to understand, forgive, move on. But now I know that closure doesn't come from someone else. It doesn't come in a perfect explanation or a final confrontation. Closure comes in the quiet. It comes when you stop waiting for the apology you deserve. When you accept that some people will never tell the truth because they don't know how to face it themselves. I never spoke to Emily again. Not once. Not after the video, not after the note, not after the night I left and erased myself from the life we built. And even now, after everything, I don't feel the urge to break that silence. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but because she already told me everything I needed to know, not with her words, but with her choices. I've built a new rhythm now, a life that moves differently, one beat at a time. Mornings feel quieter, more deliberate. I wake up and stretch without wondering if someone else is lying beside me. I walk Max through the park and breathe in the kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. I work. I read. I cook again. Not always well, but with intention. There's no background tension, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just stillness. Space. Lena is still in the picture. We take it slow. No pressure, no grand declarations. Just honesty. And it's strange how easy it is to be with someone when you're not constantly measuring their words, scanning for what they're not saying. She looks at me like she sees exactly who I am. Not a man broken by what happened, but one reshaped by it. Stronger, clearer, maybe even better. I've learned that love isn't about keeping someone no matter what. It's about choosing each other day after day without lies between you. I didn't lose Emily because I wasn't enough. I lost her because she stopped choosing me. And that has nothing to do with my worth. If you're reading this and you're where I was, doubting, guessing, holding your breath in your own home, let me say this. You're not crazy. If something feels off, it usually is. And you don't need permission to trust your gut. You don't need absolute proof to feel hurt. But when that truth finally arrives, when the fog lifts, don't stay out of habit. Don't cling to the wreckage. Step out. Save yourself. I thought betrayal would define me, but it didn't. What defines me is how I left. What defines me is how I began again. And what stays now is only what's real.